for the downtown tree evaluation, and he has prepared a PowerPoint presentation, so I'm going to open up the floor to them.
All right, thank you guys for having me here. Again, my name's Matt Lewandowski, work for Prime and Newhoff Engineers. Our company is the city's engineer as well as headquarters in Grand Rapids. We have offices in Traverse City, Cadillac, Kalamazoo, Holland, and Muskegon. I work out of the Holland office. I was our first landscape architect, and I'm pleased to have been given the chance to come up here and take a look at the downtown and take a look at the trees. I know there's been a lot of debate over the trees. Hopefully some of that can be resolved tonight, or at least a little more information can be given to you guys to be able to move and make a decision on what you'd like to do. So tonight I was just going to go through what I came up with and for the report. A lot of what you see is pretty much exactly in the report, minus I didn't put every picture of every tree that I took because that would have just been way too long for tonight. So with that being said, thank you again, and I'll move through here. So in the report, I first laid out just kind of the setting where we are. You guys know all this stuff already, but the streetscape was renovated in '91, 26 years ago. A lot of what you see out there in the streetscape, as you know, is from that era. And this fall, we were asked to take a look at things again. The map in the bottom right corner is a map that's in the report. It gives you kind of the temperature zones of Michigan and where Stanton falls in that area. Obviously, the lake over on the lake side, it's a little bit warmer climate, and here it's not much different, but it is a little cooler in the center of the state. So that being said, it's not enough to affect the many different tree species that you can find succeed here in the center of the state. First off, this is a little bit out of order from the report, but I wanted to just go through how I view trees and just what some of the research has been lately on the value of trees for downtowns. A lot of this is intuitive. People know these things by when you visit, you feel it, you can see it. But over the last 10, 20 years, there's been a lot of research done on the value of trees. In terms of what the cost of a tree costs compared to the value that it returns to a downtown or a given area, whether that's a neighborhood, it's one of the best investments for your dollar really you can do. We've all been to amazing cities and parks and whatnot, and they provide a sense of place. They give shade. There's lots of many benefits and this. And a quote from an article that I had read is preparing for this was that the article was called "The 22 Benefits of Urban Street Trees." And it says that a single tree returns over $90,000 of direct benefits, not including the aesthetic, social, and natural in the lifetime of the tree. So of course that number is based on a study that was done not from Stanton probably, so that number is not exactly applicable for where you are here, but it just represents the idea that they have a lot of value that can actually be quantified and has been quantified by other communities. Some of the benefits, that the urban trees provide. Here's just a quick list of those. They found that they reduce traffic speed, provide a safer walking environment. They provide place-making planting strips. That just means you put a tree in the ground. Usually you're going to have some plantings around it, which beautifies the area. They've been found to have increased security. Businesses are improved when there's healthy trees downtown. If designed properly, there can be less drainage infrastructure needed because of the tree's ability to absorb stormwater. Obviously, they provide protection from the elements, so you've got wind, snow, rain. Trees can kind of temper that a little bit for the users of your downtown. Obviously, trees improve air quality. They lower the overall urban air temperature. That's more important maybe in cities like Chicago or big cities with lots and lots of pavement. But this was just a list that was from that article. It helps improve the visual focus. So if you're walking down a street with a nice streetscape like in the picture, your eyes naturally go to where you want them to go, which is to the signs, to the activities, to the people on the street. So they help you visually focus. They improve overall physical and psychological health. There's been studies done in introducing people to nature. Actually benefits a person physically and psychologically. There's proven benefits to that. Trees in a downtown lower the pace for pedestrians. Slower pedestrians means they're probably spending more time spending money. always a good thing in the downtown. They obviously, they've showed that they add value to the businesses and homes around. You can look at a number of neighborhoods and developments around Michigan, and the ones that are typically the most valued are the ones with nice trees. The same goes for a downtown. And they've also found that it increases the length of the life of the pavement as well, just because of the way that they protect it from the elements. Probably not significantly, but they've shown that it does improve pavement life. I don't want to oversell some of these ideas, but just these are the lists that we found from some of the research we did before I finished the tree report. So, for the purposes of the study, I came downtown and walked around and had a nice tour. Thank you for the tour guides that took me around the city. I appreciate that. And basically just looked at all your trees, measured them, gave an overall, took a picture of each one, evaluated them for their overall health, and looked at where they're sitting. Are they in a tree grate, or are they in the grass? Are they in a planter? Are there any other obstructions around them that could be affecting their health? So I tried to get a holistic look at the tree's health and what it provides, as well as looking at the species. So the three predominant trees downtown, as you guys know, are the crabapples, Bradford pear trees, and the Japanese tree lilacs. Those, again, were in different situations. And so in the report, you'll find there's a picture of every tree and its size, its approximate height. I didn't measure every tree because that just would have been a very long process that you wouldn't want to pay me to do. If there was any issues, so like you see at the bottom, you see at the bottom here, is this pointer to that one? There we go. I have, concrete heaving the grate. This one has some overhead utilities above it, or I've noted if it was in a planter, things like that you'll find in the report. Then in the report you'll find a summary of each type of tree, where they're located. I found that obviously these trees were 26 years old. They have irrigation. There's 35 pear trees in the downtown. 35 pear trees in the downtown in those various situations. And kind of as expected, the overall size of the tree increased depending on the situation it was in. The smallest diameter trees were in the tree grates. The next largest trees were in planters, and the largest diameter trees were in lawn. I believe that probably is a direct correlation to the amount of soil that they're able to take up and utilize for growth. The overall height followed the same pattern, so the bigger the diameter of the tree, the taller the tree was. So just wanted to give a really good in-depth inventory of what you guys have there. Took a look at the Japanese tree lilacs. I know a lot of these or all of these were planted relatively recently. This is a tree that's native to northern Japan, Korea. It's used all over Michigan. It's a very common tree. It's a nice tree. The ones here in Stanton are about 3 years old, I figured. And there were 20 of them, and they were found exclusively in tree grates. From what I heard, the tree grates were existing because of the trees that were removed in their place. And the average height was 9 feet, and with a caliper of about 2 to 3 inches. And the third tree, the crabapples, those were placed, again, the same vintage as the Bradford pears. Crabapples, as many of you know, are common again throughout Michigan. There are many, many varieties of them. They can be taller, shorter, many different colors. I'm not positive on the particular variety of this one, but appeared to be healthy. They were found exclusively in planter beds, like you'll see in the picture there, in groupings. And of the ones in Main Street, I know there's a group of them on the south side of the road that are just outside of the right-of-way line. There's a group of, I think, 5 there. Those are probably the same vintage, but I felt like those might have been in private property, so I didn't include them. Maybe those were not in private property, I'm not sure. But so there was 9 that I found, and those varied from those were all about 6 inches caliper and 15 feet in height. And they were found on the ends of the downtown, and this is kind of a common thing to do in downtown design. It was a nice element that back when you guys had the original plan done, It's a flowering tree, so it signifies you're entering the downtown, you know, a beautiful flowering crabapple tree. So that's my thinking as to why they were placed on the ends of the downtown like that. On to the evaluation part of it. So that was the end of the inventory. This is where I'm kind of giving my opinions as to what I found and based on what I know about trees. So I did some research. The Bradford pear tree typically lives about 20 to 23 years. In an urban environment, it can sometimes be less. Every tree obviously is different depending on where it is. These ones have effectively reached the end of their life. I mean, they're still standing, they're still green. They're not dead, of course, yet, but I think the longer that they're in the ground, the more problems you'll probably start to have. And obviously, I know that there's an issue with berries as well with those. Berries can be a nuisance, and so my recommendation, and you'll see at the end here, is to start to plan for the eventual replacement of those Bradford pears. Again, they were commonly used in Michigan. There are newer varieties of Bradford pear that don't have the same problems. So you'll see here in number 2, I have branch structure. A lot of pear trees from this vintage had a tendency as they get bigger to split. So the entire half the tree could fall over. It's just a weakness in this strain of tree. So the older these get, the more likely that could happen. Number 3, I kind of commented on the cleanliness. I already mentioned that. And the overall height of the tree, this type of tree in particular is, it's tall, but it's not quite tall enough in my opinion. Some of the most successful downtowns that I've seen, the trees are allowed to get up above the person's view, and actually even up the branching up above the signs. Because I know that signs and the visibility of the signs is very important. So there's obviously a growing period where the trees need to get to a point, but this particular tree, the way that its branches are, they kind of start low and they're kind of irregular, and so I think they're at as high as they're going to get. So to really get the view to the businesses and the signs, they would have to be trimmed up quite a bit higher, which would be unnatural for this kind of tree. So you'll see in my recommendation at the end that I think that when you do go to replace some trees here, that I would not recommend replacing them with the same variety. And then,
Smiling worm?
am I smiling?
Everybody.
Oh. And then the last category I looked at for each of those species was the environment. Okay, where are they sitting on the site? So approximately 12 of those trees are on Camburn Street. Not only are they dropping berries and are quite old, they're also outgrowing the tree grates that they're in, if they were in the tree grate, and they're starting to cause the bricks to heave, the concrete to heave. It's really just a function of age. It wasn't necessarily a bad choice back when it was done. I don't think anybody made a mistake when they planted these. They're just getting older and they've got to that point. So I know that there's been some work to address the tripping hazards that have been caused by the trees outgrowing the grates and the concrete heaving. So that's definitely a concern you guys should think about, is how long do we want to continue to do that to keep the trees from being a tripping hazard, which obviously is liability to a city. I don't think of it as an extreme liability by any means, but obviously in a downtown setting like that, with pedestrians and people, with mobility issues, you want to make your downtown environment as easy to get around as you can. So that's kind of how I viewed the pear trees, and you'll see some more at the end here as to kind of a formal summary of recommendations. The other species on site here, this one might be a little bit more of a surprise, kind of how I view this, but I just want to give you my thoughts on it. This is the Japanese tree lilac. Those are the ones I mentioned earlier. The ones out here are obviously still quite young, so they're healthy. They're good, healthy trees. I don't see any problem with the trees in their current state, other than the fact that I don't think they're going to get tall enough for what you guys really need to create a really enclosed and just kind of a cozy feel to your downtown. These trees get at a maximum 15 to 20 feet tall, And again, most of the branching is gonna be lower, so when they get to their full height, they're gonna be right in the way of the signs, I'm afraid. Again, unless they were significantly trimmed, and which would be unnatural, I think, for this type of tree. Cleanliness, I don't believe is an issue necessarily with this tree. There are, from what I was reading, you could probably comment more, but let's say there's some flower heads that if you remove those quickly, then seeds are not as much of an issue. There's a little bit of maintenance to those trees, but not an abnormal amount, I wouldn't say. It wouldn't be a reason to not use a tree like this, but something to note, if you do like this type of tree, you can prevent seeds from being a problem if the flower heads are removed quickly. For their height, I mentioned the height again. This I view kind of an issue long term for this tree. And then of the environment that the tree is in, it's in an existing tree grade. It seems to be doing okay now. Obviously, as you've been working on keeping those brick pavers down and the concrete cleaned up from the issues of the previous trees that were there. But over time, when you guys do decide to do something with the downtown, or if you end up wanting to replace these tree grates or the concrete and bricks around those specific trees, it's going to be more disturbance to those trees. So you'll want to plan that out so that it's the least impacting that it can be in terms of removing those trees at some point. And then the crabapple trees, those again, they were planted, I believe, in the 1991 design. I believe they serve their purpose well. They still have some life left in them. They typically live about 30 years. Oh, I should mention, though, sorry, on the last slide, this tree lives about 35 years, so they live a long time. That's not a concern. If you wanted to keep those in this situation there, it's a long-lived tree. Crab apples are a little bit less long-lived, but they still have some life left in them. If they're 26 years old, live typically about 30 years in this condition. They're getting towards the end of their life, but with some proper maintenance, you could probably keep those going for a while. I know that they have berries as well, and maybe there's some concerns with the maintenance related to those. I don't see a need for you guys to really do anything with those at this time, unless you just felt strongly enough about updating those trees. Again, the branching structure of a typical crabapple, this one in particular is kind of a base shape, kind of nice. It's a single trunk tree, gets about 15 to 20 feet tall again, and it's a nice tree for the right situation. You wouldn't want to put these all the way through downtown, but in key situations where you want some color or some flower, it's a nice tree to have. Next part of the report you'll find is kind of the summary of the concerns. So I'll just kind of read this. When visiting the downtown, the first thing that I noticed is that the current downtown was built according to a plan. Many communities tried to skip this step and failed to think long term. The design and implementation of the plan in '91 was a good idea. Unfortunately, the streetscape and many of the streets are just starting to show their age. That's kind of my summary. The summary of the concerns, again, as we talked about, are the overall age of the streetscape, the particular species and the problems associated with those. More specifically, the pear tree's age, the debris from the pear trees, and then the overall height of the Japanese tree lilacs, the tree grate damage, and the damage to the concrete pavers around those. So those are the big ones, when looking at the overall concerns that I saw with the trees in the downtown. So on to recommended action. See, this is the fun part. This is where we talk about the future. So I would recommend that you guys, it's up to you obviously completely how you handle this, and there's lots of factors involved, so this is a big decision, but I would recommend that you start to develop a long-range, multi-phase plan to start to phase out some of the trees, cutting them down. Making sure that the removals are coordinated to minimize impacts to the businesses. I would also recommend that the most problematic trees, I would say, are probably the ones on Camburn Street. They'll probably be a surprise to anyone. The pear trees there are in tree grades, they're the least healthy, and they've caused the most problems probably to the surrounding area around the trees. Doing some preliminary research on good species that I would recommend. There are many others that you could look at. Ones that I've seen do well is a hybrid honey locust called Skyline honey locust. Although it has small leaves, which some people don't like, but they are wonderful trees for the downtown. They get nice and tall. They have an open type of canopy, so they do provide shade, but it's not blocking completely the sunlight. They handle trimming well. They grow. You really wouldn't even need irrigation around them other than at the startup. They're very tough trees. And some people like the little leaves because they blow away. I know that they can tend to blow into a business. Some of that is maintenance maybe that's unavoidable with just having anything living near downtown that's going to require maintenance. Another good species is the Princeton Century Ginkgo. This is another great street tree. It's a lot more symmetrical looking. So the ginkgo grows a little bit more organically. It's still nice looking, but the Princeton Century Ginkgo tree is again a great downtown tree. It handles lots of environments. It's tough, but it's a lot more symmetrical looking. So it depends on the kind of the look you're looking for. A lot of times downtowns will have a couple, 2 or 3 varieties. That way, if something goes wrong with one, now you don't have issues to the entire downtown. So usually you'll see 2 or 3 types of trees. I don't anticipate any issues with these trees. They're proven trees, but just a word of wisdom, I guess, on that. And then if you're of the maple variety, the Jeffers Red is a great downtown maple variety. It's not going to get as big as a big silver maple that you might see in grandma's backyard or wherever, the ones that grow fast and are weak. This is a tree that was designed for streetscapes. It gets a nice red leaf on it, and it's a very nice street tree. So again, I would recommend developing a long-range plan. Also, along with the tree removal and replacement, to start to work on some of the areas around the trees in the street and the sidewalk. Obviously, when you remove the tree grate, there's some work to be done on the ground as well. Some of the tree grates I think could be saved if you wanted to save them. Kind of depends on how much cost becomes an issue. Some of the tree grates are warped and bent and maybe don't want to be saved. So really it's up to you how you handle those, but I think the plan for starting to address those would be a good thing as well. And anytime you're working in a downtown, as you guys know, you want to maximize your dollars. A lot of communities will incorporate streetscape improvements with other improvements that are necessary. So when you go to replace a water main or sewer line or the road itself, there's cost savings to kind of rolling these projects together. And then obviously using available grant funds is always a good idea. So, cost information, this is just kind of a quick little list of costs. This is not a guarantee of costs. This is just some ideas based on some experience we have. So just replacing a tree is not as simple as replacing a tree. It's removing the tree costs money. Removing and storing the tree grate costs money. Reinstalling the old tree grate costs money. So we've got, those costs are listed here. So it's kind of the trees themselves are not usually even the most expensive part of it. A typical shade tree is $500 to $600. You can get better pricing depending on how many you buy and from where you're getting them. I don't have local pricing here handy, but this is kind of a normal range, $500 to $600 for a nice 2-inch shade tree installed in the ground. Sometimes And I also have a list here for if you wanted to replace those crabs. A typical crab apple will be that, $350 to $500 range, depending on the variety and the quantity, of course. And new tree grates turn out to be very expensive as well, so that's why you may really want to consider over time you either replacing slowly or reusing some tree grates if necessary. They can oftentimes be cleaned and repainted. Powdered, you can get them sandblasted and re-powder coated with a new fresh coat paint, and sometimes you can make those work for a while. It all depends on your preferences on that. As a designer, I love to see everything going brand new. Obviously, I know that's not always the case for everybody. So you've got options though, I think. And then of course there's incidental costs that always come up with construction. Irrigation lines get hit. You'll find that you'll end up wanting to replace a section of curb, or maybe as you replace a tree in some area around it, you realize you need to replace 6 squares of concrete along with it. Maybe it's best to do the whole, wait till we can afford to do the whole strip here. So those are things to consider as you kind of move forward. So that's it. A lot of information really quickly, and I open it up to any questions you guys have.
I've seen in Grand Rapids, they've got downtown there, don't have grades, they look like, almost like asphalt or something. I don't know, to me like that, is that easier, less expensive than the grades?
It is less expensive. From a designer's perspective, I don't think it looks as good, but the reason they do it is because it is easier to maintain. It lets water through. A lot of those are, there's different types of those, but some of them are either a stone that's kind of mixed with like a glue, and when they mix it and lay it down, it lets water go through, lets air go through still, but then it's a nice smooth surface so you can walk on it, and cigarette butts don't fall down into it and cause problems cleaning it up. It keeps everything at the surface.
Frankenmuth has grades, but they only had half a grade. On the sidewalk side of the street was a grade, and the other street side was just dirt.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of communities do it differently. Downtown Holland has some tree grades. They've got some places where it's just dirt and mulch. A little bit of everything's been done. So it really depends on your comfort level with the level of maintenance that the different options take.
Do you have kind of in your mind like a vision for the process or what the end product might look like? For example, one of the problems has been the trees in the beds, there's no more room to plant flowers. So in the future, would you recommend that no trees go in the beds? Would they only go in the grates? Or what's your picture look like when you see what after phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, like what should it look like?
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. I've seen situations where there are trees and planters like that and there are no issues. Trees are planted deeper for whatever reason, the roots are down lower, and you can still plant inside of the area. I haven't developed a full vision for what your downtown could look like yet, really. I mean, I have some ideas in my mind, maybe, of what I've seen. You have a good backbone already, honestly. I don't think the design that you were given in '91 was a bad design. And there's been some challenges I know with it, but I think a variety is good. You want to have mature trees. You want to have varying heights in key areas, but most of the downtown should have taller stuff. And then planters are usually shorter. A lot of downtowns have area around the planters for annuals, if the shopkeepers or even the downtown staff wants to maintain annuals. It's just really your personal preference, a lot of it too. So, I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, and then another thing was if you did have the tree in the planter, do you have any expertise on, like if you raise the edges of the planter around the tree and put more soil in there so that you can plant your decorative plants, and then just, kind of put some gravel around the tree, would that hurt the tree to fill the soil up higher?
Yeah, you never really want to put extra soil over around the trunk of a tree. In that situation, I would honestly think that you could probably get more aggressive with getting the roots out of there if you're having issues with planting. Trees, the roots on a lot of trees are really tough, and they say you can remove, this is not a quote, no quote in this, but in school they taught us that you can remove up to a quarter of a tree's root structure and it'll survive. You wouldn't want to do it too aggressively all at once, but a lot of big trees get moved to the tree spade, and they effectively cut off a whole bunch of roots. So I think you could probably get more aggressive with making the tree comply with what you want for the other plants. And the other plants typically can work around the roots. So that's just my take on it.
Why do you guys always show the tall trees in other cities? We can't put tall trees in because consumers will come in and rip the tops right out because of our power lines.
Yeah, because it's what's been successful.
But why do you show it? 'Cause we have power lines. You can't, consumers will come in and top them right off,
Well, if
and you can't stop them.
I understand that concern. I guess you have to have a longer term thinking to it. I guess maybe,
But you showed a picture of beautiful tall trees, tall as the buildings.
sure,
Can we do it?
just have to put the power underground. I'm just giving you big picture ideas here. I mean, unless you think you can work with consumers to get them a tree trimming program that works. So,
Do we have power lines like all down Main Street? I know you had some pictures of the on Camburn, the trees in the power lines, but is it going?
I don't
Right
remember
down
seeing big
east,
power
west,
lines down
down.
Main Street, to be honest with you. It kind of
And one
surprised
crab
me.
apples, you got it.
That's at the very
At the very end.
south and, or east and west, east and west end is where the crabapple trees are located. That's the only place that those crabapples are located.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing power lines right downtown. There were some.
Yeah, there's no power lines on the actual.
The only lines on Main Street were speaker lines from the old fashioned days. Speakers.
Yes, speaker.
So it doesn't sound like it's an issue on Main Street. I don't know if there's any power lines.
Time and time again.
But in general, I guess, on that comment, you're right. It's, if there was a situation where power lines were in the way, you would want to design for a shorter tree, or work with the power company to see if you can get them to trim it properly, or the other option is seeing if power can be buried. It has been done. Any questions?
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.